Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I am flying solo today, Monday, January 6th, 2025. So I will be delivering the Washington report and the call to action. Let's get right to it. House and Senate both return today, Monday. They'll be in session. The House will be in session until Thursday. The Senate will be in session until Friday. Let's do a quick wrap-up on government funding. The last full week before Christmas, the House and Senate finally passed a slimmed-down continuing resolution to keep the government funded. The bill passed the House by a vote of 366 to 34, with all 34 no votes coming from Republicans. The bill passed the Senate by a vote of 85 to 11 and was signed into law on Saturday, December 21. The continuing resolution was as clean a CR as Speaker Johnson was able to get through the House. It did not contain the debt ceiling suspension that President Trump wanted, and it did not contain the congressional pay raise that many members of Congress wanted. Nor did it contain about 1,200 pages worth of additional spending items the Democrats wanted as the price for their votes. On the other hand, it did contain a one-year extension of the authorization for the Farm Bill, an additional $30 billion in emergency funding for farmers, and an additional $100 billion in funding for disaster relief. Funding in the continuing resolution expires on March 14, about 7.5 weeks after President Trump's inauguration. And that means that while he's working to get his nominees confirmed and work on a massive reconciliation bill or two that combines border security, energy, defense, and significant tax cut provisions, President Trump will also have to work to finalize funding levels for the second half of fiscal 2025. This week in the House and Senate will meet in a joint session in the House chamber this afternoon to count the electoral votes. On Tuesday, and for the balance of the week, the House is scheduled to consider two pieces of legislation pursuant to a rule. H.R. 29, the Lake and Riley Act, and H.R. 23, the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act. This week in the Senate will come back on Monday at noon, a few minutes before 1 p.m. Senators will walk across the Capitol to join the House for the quadrennial count of the Electoral College votes. Senate committees require a one-week notice before any hearing can be held, so we won't see confirmation hearings for Trump cabinet members until next week, beginning on Tuesday. Now let's talk about electing the Speaker. Speaker Mike Johnson predicted he would be elected Speaker for the 119th Congress on the first ballot, and he was right, but only because he kept the vote open while he worked to win the votes of members who had chosen to cast votes for others or not at all. Friday began with 434 members-elect in the chamber. Former Congressman Matt Gaetz, who had won election to the 119th Congress, but had informed the clerk of the House that he would not take the oath as a member for the 119th Congress, was absent. With 434 members-elect ready to cast votes for Speaker, the majority threshold was set at 218. That's how many votes would be needed to win the speakership, assuming everyone voted for a live person. As the roll call was conducted, 6 members-elect, Andy Biggs, Andrew Clyde, Paul Gosar, Michael Cloud, Andy Harris, and Chip Roy, chose not to announce a vote for Speaker. 3 other members-elect, Thomas Massie, Keith Self, and Ralph Norman, voted for others. Massie voted for Majority Whip Tom Emmer. Self voted for Byron Donalds, and Norman voted for Jim Jordan. At the end of the roll call, Johnson was down 9 votes. He would need 8 of them to get to 218. And just to show you how dangerous this maneuver was, if the first ballot had been brought to a close after the first call of the roll, Hakeem Jeffries would have been elected Speaker. That's because the 6 members-elect who chose not to announce a vote lowered the number of votes cast from 434 to 428. In so doing, they lowered the majority threshold necessary from 218 to 215. precisely the number of votes Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries won on the first ballot. Within short order, the 6 members-elect who had not announced their votes made clear to the clerk that they were indeed voting for Johnson. That still left 3 who had voted for others: Massey, Self, and Norman. Massey had made clear he would not support Johnson for Speaker. Self and Norman, on the other hand, were deemed persuadable. In short order, the 2 of them joined Speaker Johnson for a conversation off the floor, along with Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a South Carolina colleague of Norman's. She got President Trump on the phone with the 2 of them, and Trump made a persuasive case. Following the call, Self and Norman walked down to the well of the House and changed their votes while the first ballot was still open, and just like that, Johnson was elected Speaker with exactly 218 votes, right on the nose. Now let's talk about the new rules of the House. For those who are interested in a deep dive, I've included in the suggested reading this week a section-by-section analysis of the rules for the 119th Congress compared to the rules for the 118th Congress. The analysis is 6 pages long. As you might expect, a lot of those 6 pages is taken up with legal language. The biggest change in the rules of the House between the 2 Congresses is that the threshold support level to introduce a motion to vacate the chair, that is, to depose the Speaker, rises from 1 single member to 9. I don't know how they settled on 9, but I can't help but wonder if it's more than coincidental that when Speaker McCarthy was deposed in the fall of 2023, there were precisely 8 Republicans who voted to overthrow him. Interestingly, on Friday, when the House was conducting its roll call vote for Speaker, exactly 9 Republican members-elect chose not to register their vote for Speaker Johnson on the first call of the roll. 6 of them failed to speak, and 3 of them actually voted for other living persons. So, knowing that the new rules package was going to change the threshold for the motion to vacate from 1 to 9 members, the House Freedom Caucus may have been showing Johnson and everyone else that there were at least 9 members willing to stand up and be counted if they felt it necessary. Now let's talk about the reconciliation strategy. Speaker Johnson didn't waste any time getting started on the 119th Congress. On Saturday, the day after he was formally installed as Speaker for this Congress, he hosted House Republicans at Fort McNair for a strategy session on the legislative agenda for the upcoming Congress. And while there, he made an announcement. He said President Trump had told him that he wanted to pass the major elements of his legislative wish list in 1 giant reconciliation bill, rather than 2. We've been talking about this for a month. Senate Majority Leader John Thune and many senior Senate Republicans think it's a better strategy to take Trump's legislative wish list and divide it into 2 piles, with border, energy, and defense issues in 1 package, and tax measures in a 2nd package. Their thinking is that the tax provisions alone are going to be complicated, so it will take several months to come to agreement inside the Republican conference. And the country, and President Trump, cannot wait that long for the rest of the stuff inside. So, their thinking goes, take the other stuff, border security, defense, and energy, for instance, and put them into a separate package that can be moved quickly through both House and Senate and put on President Trump's desk early. That would help build momentum for a 2nd package to come later. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith disagrees strongly. He thinks it's going to be very hard to get all Republicans on board for the tax provisions, and that concerns him. The personal tax cuts that were passed as part of the Trump tax cuts in 2017 will expire at the end of this year, and if they're not extended, 62% of American households will see a tax hike. It will be the largest tax hike in history. So, for the chairman of the committee that writes tax legislation, that's an unacceptable outcome. He knows it's going to be difficult, and that's why he wants 1 bill rather than 2. He thinks he's going to need a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down, and he sees the border, energy, and defense provisions as that sugar. They're going to help him grease the legislative skids for the difficult tax provisions he needs to pass. For those who look to history, Smith has one other point to make in his argument. Since the turn of the century, he notes, no legislative majority has succeeded in passing 2 reconciliation bills in 1 year. Some have tried, but the most any majority has ever succeeded in passing is 1 reconciliation bill. And since he cannot accept the prospect of not passing a tax bill that at the very least extends the 2017 Trump tax cuts and prevents a massive tax hike, that means his tax provisions have to be inside that first and likely only reconciliation bill. But just because Speaker Johnson announced on Saturday that Trump had told him he wanted one big, beautiful bill, Senate Republicans didn't accept that the argument was over. In fact, incoming Budget Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham and Finance Committee member Ron Johnson both went on Sunday talk shows and argued for the Senate's 2-bill strategy as if it were still an open question. President Trump settled the question Sunday evening, at least for now, with a post to Truth Social. Quote, "Members of Congress are getting to work on one powerful bill that will bring our country back and make it greater than ever before. We must secure our border, unleash American energy, and renew the Trump tax cuts, which were the largest in history. But we will make it even better. No tax on tips. It will all be made up with tariffs and much more from countries that have taken advantage of the U.S. for years. Republicans must unite and quickly deliver these historic victories for the American people. Get smart, tough, and send the bill to my desk to sign as soon as possible. Make America great again." End quote. And then, this morning, on Hugh Hewitt's radio show, President Trump unsettled the question he had settled the night before. Quote, "While I favor one bill," he said, "I also want to get everything passed. And, there are some people that don't necessarily agree with it." End quote. So, Trump has a preference for one bill, but he would not oppose a 2-bill strategy. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. Members of the House Republican Conference will meet with President Trump this coming weekend at Mar-a-Lago to discuss their legislative strategy. There are a lot of moving parts in this picture. Everyone is going to have some part of this package that they are going to dislike intensely. The leadership's hope is that everyone can find just enough in this package to like that the leadership will be able to cobble together 216 votes in the House and 51 votes in the Senate. Stay tuned. Now to Trump lawfare. On Friday of last week, New York Judge Juan Merchan said he plans to sentence President Trump for his criminal convictions in the New York hush money case on Friday, January 10. That's this coming Friday. In doing so, Merchan rejected efforts by the president to overturn the jury's verdict. Merchan indicated he would not sentence Trump to incarceration, acknowledging that it is not a, quote, practicable, unquote, option. Further, Merchan said Trump could attend the sentencing virtually, rather than requiring him to report to court in person. That's our Washington report for this week. Now to the call to action. Please visit the front page of our website, teapartypatriots.org. That's teapartypatriots.org to sign up to support President Trump's nominees and his agenda. You can find a form right there on the front page and use it to join our team of patriots committed to defending individual liberty, shrinking the size and scope of government, and enacting the Make America Great Again agenda. We'll see you next week. Until then, be well and be active.